at the Desmond Hotel in Albany for the convention of the Sons of Italy. And Adriana Trigiani was awarded today for the Literary Award. And I grabbed the occasion to have her, so I asked her, and she graciously accepted. And I really thank you very much for
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Okay. Did you enjoy the award?
Well, I think when I walked in, on my way out, I was reminded that, you know, when I came in, I said, oh, it's my people. Because this is my group, really.
Yeah.
This is where it all started. This is where it all began. I don't think an artist makes a conscious decision to write a certain thing.
Yeah.
But I just am gravitated toward family stories, and that's how it started.
Have you ever thought of becoming a stand-up comedian? Because I think you could make much more money.
So kind of you. I had a comedy group, and I think that the life of a performer is really difficult. I don't think I could. Now I'm just speaking for me. But I could, and that's a huge compliment you just paid me, so thank you. But first of all, I like to go to bed early.
I see.
And if you're going to be a comedian, you're going to be out at midnight. I'm not interested. That's number one. And then number two, I think I have a little family. I have one daughter, and she's 6, and I like to be there. So I think it's hard.
I hear you have quite a few clubs, reading clubs or fan clubs.
Oh, yeah. You know, this is the thing. It's a moving target, basically, the marketing of books. And you'll even see from my book jackets that I think it started out more literary, and now we've gone to kind of images of iconic women, which isn't good for my men readers. They have to put them in a brown paper bag to read them. But it's a constantly moving thing, and the book clubs started for me 10 years ago when I would go to speak in a small venue, and they'd say, oh, can you come to dinner with us? And I'd say, well, I can't because I have to get on the plane and go to the next town. And they would say, well, how can I get a hold of you? And I began taking phone numbers. And now I would say we're at...
They keep you busy, I imagine.
Oh, thousands of them, thousands. I do 3 or 4, I did 2 last night.
And I
Skyped,
I see
which
you also travel outside of the U.S. for...
A lot. I just went to England, the United Kingdom, Scotland, Ireland, all through there, and I do that every year. And we did South Africa, we did Italy, Germany. We get everywhere.
And some of your novels are becoming films. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. Big Stone Gap is a small theatrical movie, which means it'll be in theaters. Barry Valentine was just sold to Lifetime Television because I feel my readers would like to stay home and just watch the movie. And they do a beautiful job with the movies. And I'm writing the script for that one because I have that background of writing scripts. And Lucia's been optioned. They've all pretty much been optioned on some level. Yeah.
Let's go a little background, your background. We know that you lived in Big Stone Gap. I couldn't believe in the beginning that was a title, but also a name of a town. I thought it was just a title.
Well, I was going to call it Bergamo because the father's from Bergamo, and it was so interesting. When I was finished with it, really was about Big Stone Gap.
But where were you born?
I was born in Pennsylvania. There's a little town called Rosetta, Pennsylvania, where my father's from, which I mentioned, and Queen of the Big Time is set there. And it's also mentioned in this best-selling nonfiction book right now by Malcolm Gladwell called Outliers. And he writes for The New Yorker, and he writes essays about things, and he begins with an essay about the town that I was born in.
What age did you or your family take you to?
I was 6, and it was in the 60s, the late 60s.
So you went to school down there at
Yeah, I went to public... Yeah, I went to 1-year Catholic school, and I got my penmanship, and then it was all public school all the way.
Now, you have a large family. How many brothers and sisters do you have?
There's 5 girls and 2 boys in my family.
Oh, 2 boys.
Yeah, 2 boys, and it's first 4 girls and then 2 boys, and that is my phone. But I'm a mother, so forgive me, because, you know, it could be something important. It could be Lucia, and just throw that off, my darling. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Oh. Anyway.
That's okay on tape. If it's my phone, it's okay.
Yeah. You were at Big Stone Gap And apparently, the large family, all lived in Big Stone Gap,
Yeah, we all,
Virginia?
yeah, we grew up there, and my parents had, you know, we were a big family, but of course then in the 70s, a lot of people had big families still. It started to really change by the 1980s, I think, because we have friends that have a lot of kids in the
I
family.
saw today that you improvise storytelling right there and
That's
there.
right.
Is there
That's
anybody?
very Italian, don't you think, Vita?
Yes, yes. I think we have oral histories, you know,
Mhm,
that people
mhm.
tell. But anybody else in your family is a storyteller?
I think that they all are.
They all are.
I would say every single one of them could get up and tell stories. That's how we, you know, amused ourselves.
I was thinking
would say.
perhaps your grandmother, did they come from Italy or they already?
My grandmother Lucia, and her name was Lucia Spada, S-P-A-D-A, and Carlo Bonicelli. They both came from northern Italy above Bergamo, little mountain town. But they met in Hoboken.
I see. Yeah, you said that.
Mhm.
And I thought that your grandmother was a real storyteller. That you, as a
Well,
child.
my grandmothers both were. In fact, the things that they told me, I really revere them still. They're both have died, but the nuggets for a lot of these stories come from them. Lucia was a neighbor in after I lived in the boarding house when I moved to New York. I lived beneath a lady, a single lady, who was a little eccentric, and then I'd come to find out her story, which is chronicled in Lucia, and that was Italian family that owned the building. So it could be blood relatives, or it could just be, but it's Italians in general, just great
get the
stories.
stories from
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah.
Let's go down to a little your youth and your education. How was your high school there in the South?
Well, I'm a very well. I was part of the public school system, so it was great. It was really the option that you had.
Did you excel in any subject?
I would
memorable?
not say that I excelled. I was very, very enamored at first. I would say I always did fine in school. Not in high school, less than I did in grade school because I was distracted.
Were you an avid reader at that time?
I
or-
have been an avid reader all my life. I started out getting books on the bookmobile. And one book that had a huge influence on me was called Harriet the Spy, about a little girl who lived in New York who was 11. And I read it when I was 10 years old, and that had a huge impact on me, made me dream of living in New York City.
How about in college? Do you remember any authors that
Oh,
influenced
yes. You want my college authors? I can give you like
A
a bunch.
couple,
Well, I
just,
studied theater.
you?
So the great playwrights, obviously, were very important to me. Chekhov, Shakespeare. I loved Restoration comedy. That was something
Any
I was crazy
Italian
about.
American?
Any Italian American writers? Well, we were just talking
At that time?
At that time, well, everybody read The Godfather. Everybody read, even though it was out long before I was in college. I was in college in the 1980s. I would say Gay Talese, of course. I read Esquire magazine when I was
Helen
a kid.
Barolini?
Helen Barolini, I know her work well.
Yeah,
Love
I
her.
imagine. She also
I
included-
should talk about Italian American writers, shouldn't I? Well, you've got your Lisa Scottolini and
No, I
Miranda
imagine if you
Pagliaro
were
and-
aware, because
yeah.
up to about 10 years ago, really the term Italian-American writers basically did not exist, even though they were writers. In fact, when I started this program, they were said, you know, who is going to be interviewed by you, because there are none.
You didn't have enough.
I
Like
did not.
David Baldacci. Well, it's not really true,
This
is
is
it?
the 120th interview that I have, and still I have so many people
And you
that
have
I
a
could...
lot of people left to go. Well, I always point out Anna Minardo. There are many
No, but that influenced you in your writing.
influenced me.
Yeah, yeah.
That's tough. I would say I'm far more influenced in terms of my storytelling in the books by Italian filmmakers. I would say, if I could just go back a little bit, right off the bat, Roberto Rossellini, very important. I'm a complete, I'm besotted with Federico Fellini. I'm fascinated by him as a person, and then Frank Capra was a huge influence on me.
But you must like film a lot, because all of your work,
There's
films
something
I've mentioned,
cinematic.
yeah.
Well, the thing is you have to figure it this way. I write a lot about the last century till the that I grew up with, the movies were the template on how to be an American. My grandmother learned how to set a table, throw a party, walk across a room, what car you bought, the mink coat, the Packard, all of these goals that my grandmother had that factory workers were from the movies, basically. And I think for immigrants always, to become part of a culture, we would respond to those things in the culture.
So the movie was also a great influence.
The movies were a huge influence because they went to the show in the 30s. You know, my grandmother was very influenced by young Joan Crawford and her haircuts and her style, and here she was, an Italian farm girl working in a factory.
Talking about factory, all the characters in your books
have real jobs.
Have real jobs, but well, they, you could say manual jobs. You know, they work in mines, quarry.
Right.
So, is that because your family has that background, or you chose to represent these people? I think it's a very interesting world that you dwell on the hard work and suffering of these people, the accidents they have in the mines, and the suffering of the families. I think all your work are populated by, of course, there are some, they are, let's say in the Rococo, you already go to people who are decorators, and also Lucia. Lucia is a seamstress, so it's a little higher, but yet it's that kind of world you represent, or at least you love to represent that. And I was wondering why you dwell so much on that.
Well, in my family life, and I think this is true when we all come together as Italian Americans, is we had to figure out ways to survive by the labor of our own hands. And my grandmother Lucia always said, it's very, very difficult to make a living. And I always look around and go, what am I actually making? What am I making here? And I remember when I was writing plays and then I was writing television, I always felt in the shadows of my grandmothers like inept, because they could make something. Now I love to cook, and I think that that's part of our culture of making something, but they never did just one job. My mother's father came over, he was a shoemaker. He died at 39 because in order to get his American citizenship, he was a kid and he went over and fought in World War I. Afterwards, he married my grandmother. She said to him, I'll do anything but farm. She just didn't like farm animals. So she was a seamstress and he was a shoemaker. And he said, well, I'll be a shoemaker and you'll sew. We'll do this together. So he couldn't just make a living making shoes and repairing them and making the boots for the miners. He went into the mines. Now they all had like 3 jobs. My grandfather, my great-grandfather, David Perrin, Davide Perrin, they say in Italy, he's Venetian. He came over, he had a farm, and he went in and blasted in the quarries. He did the explosives and lost part of his hand. Well, oh my God,
quarry,
and I chronicle that in Queen of the Big Town.
Yeah, the Big Stone Gap talks about the mines.
Well, that, yes, and it's very interesting.
Is it because you lived there, you saw actually what happened?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, most of the kids I went to school with were somehow affiliated with the railroad industry or the mines.
I see.
And most of those kids were several generations of coal miners. Now, knowing that my grandfather was an iron ore miner in Minnesota, I was, of course, very fascinated by that, but in Big Stone Gap specifically, it was all coal mining. And what we came to find out, and this is really interesting, you know, in Big Stone Gap, my premise is she's the only Italian in town. But that's not true, because there were Italians, but they went back. They made their money, and there's a little section in Big Stone Gap called Italy Bottom. Like Frog Level, Italy Bottom. I just go, why is it called Italy Bottom? Well, that's where the Italian workers lived, in these shacks along the river, before they made their dough and they went back to Italy, or married somebody and changed their names. That's a big one,
Do you know why the town was called Big Stone Gap?
I do. Do you know?
No.
Well, there's 3 rivers, and at the fork of the 3 rivers, there was a natural break in the outline of the mountain, the stone, and this was the gap that was created by the confluence of 3 rivers.
So it's like a valley.
It was originally called 3 rivers.
You also used the word holler.
Holler, H-O-L-L-E-R, yeah, instead of hollow.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I got in a little trouble with my 7th grade English teacher when I titled Big Cherry Holler, but I said, I defended it this way. I said it was more poetic to me because it's really a book about an argument of a marriage that's 8 years in and they've lost a child. And I said they're hollering, and I love that word. So I just used holler, and when we're home we'd say Cracker's Neck holler or Dickinson holler, holler, holler. Yeah. So I just did it. But my teachers thought it was improper.
At one point you mentioned a teacher who influenced you to write, and you
Are you talking about Greg Cantrell?
Yeah.
That I dedicated? Well, I came up in the public school system, and to me, my teachers were the rock stars of my youth. I idolized my teachers.
That's great that you say so.
I think educators are. I have a great uncle that was an educator. I think it is cousin Monica Spadoni who's an educator. To me, it's the penultimate profession. In the Queen of the Big Time,
she
yes,
wanted to become a teacher.
That was her dream. That sort of was. I just let these characters talk to me, but I had things about my grandmother, and I wrote this book a few years after she died that I didn't want to forget about life on the farm. And I went to Italy to visit my mother's side of the family, and she had a great uncle, my great uncle, who actually baptized me, who was a Catholic priest, a Monsignor, and his name was Monsignor Don Andrea Spada, and he was the baby in Lucia's family, and he became a priest and the editor of the Lecco di Bergamo for almost 40 years. And we always visited him, and we were very close to them. And he told me the story of the priest, and I took that from him, and I married it to my grandmother's life. But my grandmother went to the 6th grade, and then she repeated the 6th grade, but the teacher couldn't push her forward because there was no school to send her to. And my great-grandfather said, I need you to go to work. So she went into the factory, and she was a forelady by the time she was 16. She was very strong and capable, and
you said you
would have loved to have gone.
You studied theater. You wanted to become a playwright?
I was a playwright to start with, but I feel
in fact, you did
now it merges everything because of the dialogue I have to write and stuff. I just think the playwriting is really important.
That was a good experience.
I think it's hard to make a living as a playwright, and I had to make a living doing this. So when I came to be a playwright, and they said, "Oh, you can write television," I didn't even know what that was really because I didn't grow up knowing about the show business at all. Only old movies.
But you grabbed the occasion and did become. Yeah. You did work on TV.
Yeah. Then when I really needed to make a living, I was in New York for a few years, and a friend of mine had my plays read by somebody in an agency, and a man named Wiley Howsam, got me my first job. I went on to a different world.
Did you work many years on that?
I did. I did many shows and many pilots.
But when did you discover that you wanted to become a writer first and then a novelist? Because it seems as a novelist you have been very successful. At this point we all have to recognize that, and I think I have met several Italian-American writers, but they always feel because they are Italian-American, not American, that they are on the fringe of the world of being an American.
Too bad.
Right. It is too bad, but I think they all have to overcome. But reading you, it was a revelation for me because you said a million times you were Italian, yet it doesn't mean anything because your novels, your work is an American. In fact, is recognized as an American, and you made even the New York Times.
Well, here's the thing. Here's really the thing. This is something that I'm very proud of, and I'm my background, and I'm endlessly fascinated by it. And I find a very wide audience, whether they are Italian or not, love these books. So, a lot of my job, I felt, was to get it to Italian Americans. Because it's not, we were talking about this in the big session, it's not a group that can be defined easily, either for political reasons, marketing reasons, or whatever. I look at it like this. I feel a complete sense of calm and connection. If you study Italian history, which I know you have because you're a professor, when you go way back, Italy was always the country that took everybody in. Right. And there was a turnover always. And I look at the evolution of Italy a lot like I look at the evolution of this literature. Look, you can say a lot of things. You can say, oh, because I'm a woman, I won't make it, or you could say because my parents weren't educated, I won't make it. You can use a million excuses. But the truth of the matter is, I have a job as a writer, and then I have a job of talking to my readers. Those two things. Writers can no longer, and it's sad for lots of writers because they like to just stay home, write their books, and not deal with people. I look at it like a gift. Like I'm able to thank people for reading the book, and I get more out of that than anything. Now,
but your work was from the very beginning was recognized as American. In fact, you have a good publisher. That many Italian Americans have a hard time in.
You're right. I have Random House, and then my editor went to Harper, and I went with my editor to Harper. So I have about 8 books at Random House, and Harper. I have the Very Valentine series, and then a young adult starting. But here's the thing, and this may be, and this has been much discussed among Italian American educators, so it's not anything new I'm saying. But we were always taught, I mean, my grandmother said to me when I told her I was going to be a playwright, she says, I hope you're not going to write about our family. Well, that's all I've done my whole life, really. When I was writing on The Cosby Show, I was writing my family. So even though it was The Cosby Show, I would think of my father, the patriarch, and the whole thing. So I can't say, part of it is we were never to put our business in the street as Italians, ever. We're never supposed to tell anything that goes on in our homes to anybody. There's like a real bond there, and a huge amount of secrecy. And really, when you do these books, sometimes I'm writing it, and people will find things really funny that I also find funny and painful. Do you know what I mean? And then when I'm really trying to be funny, my readers will find it poignant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
the subject,
you got to fight. If you're going to publish books, this is the deal. You're going to have to fight for your market. I mean, you just do. It's a lot of work.
Basically, you have discovered this world. We all talk about the Italian family, the Jewish family, but not many times you can really see what the Italian family is, for example. And with your books, that's all you do is you get individual by individual. You know, at the end of the book, you know the whole family, and you know how it develops. You stay with the family atmosphere. The world outside is not that important. And I think that maybe you do have something, you caught on something that I think maybe we should pay more attention to, because you show very many values, Italian-American values, which are there. Probably other people, other ethnic people recognize the same values, because basically a family is a family.
Well, you know, Vito, like today when I was signing, the women always whisper in my ear, because Italian-American women have felt underrepresented, okay, or underrepresented in literature in a big way. And we know that they're so central to the Italian family. And I would argue that Mario Puzo's books, like The Godfather, that what people loved in those movies and what people loved in the book was the family. They were interested in the dynamics of the family. Any of the popular television shows that feature Italian-American characters or Italian characters that come over or whatever, emigrate over, again,
but the
violence is the window dressing.
They use the family.
They're interested in those relationships.
Yeah,
correct.
They start as a family, but then you show other aspects that are not really part of a family, but they are associated to the family. And I think not just in Puzo, but other later TV program we have seen. I don't even want to mention the names. It's family, and then they eat whatever, and then they go outside and they kill people like crazy.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And,
but
and
here,
look, you know what?
it's a real.
And I defend that writer's right to write that. It's
but
fine.
You don't have to read it.
And you don't have to read it, and you don't have to watch it. But the Italian-American community can't simply complain about those images.
Right.
You have to support the images that you believe are more accurate.
Right.
And that's the part that when I come out to talk to Italian Americans, I always say that, look, you know, you have to step up.
Yeah, you have to step up.
You
And
know,
I
there-
think you are doing fantastic. You're really coming up with a family that is genuine, and the people. One of the Italian American
Thank you, Vito.
complaints.
That's very kind.
One of the Italian American complaint of Italian American writers is that Italians do not read. I'm sure it is true in every other ethnic background or whatever. I think today people generally read less because of TV, movies, there's so much. But do you find that people do read your books? I mean, is it, you are selling, right?
Well, there's probably 4 million in print, more now, which is very good. They would say huge.
Mm-hmm. So
You know, for me to sell, I have to sell, 100,000 in hardcover. That's a big hit. I'm on the bestseller list for many weeks, and that's because people continue to buy
Right.
them at a rate.
So if you do
So
present the work,
I'm doing okay.
if you present the work, people will read it. It's just that it has to be a specific.
Well, I don't know why they're saying Italians don't read. That doesn't really make any sense
Because
to me.
in the Italian American community, especially in New York, people that I know have written books, but they are sophisticated, high literary, argumentative, but, they have issues and things. And they say, well, people don't read because, but I think it
But
also
it's
has to
true,
do with
we
the
have to
work.
look at the whole population, okay? You have a